صلوات على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرج أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah you all are doing well. My apologies for running late. I showed up at about 7:12 myself, so sorry to everybody that was already here on time at 7 p.m. So we're inshallah going to get straight into the speech, but before that I'll just recite a short surah Al-Asr inshallah. As you all know, we're here for the celebration of the wilayat of our 10th Imam, Imam Ali al-Hadi al-Naqi alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. And so we are thankful to Sheikh Mahdi for coming to Austin for tonight. So inshallah we all benefit from his presence. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر صدق الله العلي العظيم. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And without further ado, if everybody can move towards the front as much as possible and invite Sheikh Mahdi with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Please recite الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرج. So inshallah everyone is doing well. I want to congratulate the brothers and sisters on the birth of our 12th Imam, Imam al-Hadi salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Recite the salawat please. When you look at the births and the shahadats of these imams, sometimes growing up, at least when you're younger, sometimes you think to yourself, well, there's so many of them, you know, like a couple days ago was the shahadat of the 10th imam. Now it's the birthday of the 10th imam. Going forward, we have the birthday of Imam al-Baghir, if I'm not mistaken, and then we have other events coming up. Growing up, you might think to yourself, well, there's so many of them. Did God really need to send all of these guys, all of these individuals, appoint each and every one of them? But it's very fascinating when you take the time to study the history of what these imams did and why they were appointed as imams. You find that each and every one of them had their specific role. Each and every one of them had their specific challenges that they were supposed to deal with. And therefore, every single one of them, it was necessary for them to be there. One of them, of course, is the 10th Imam, as we mentioned. So today, inshallah, we're going to continue with the discussion that we had regarding signs, the signs that we receive from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you remember on Friday night, we were discussing, we said that in our cultures, there are a number of things that are seen as signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We named a number of them. The first category that we mentioned were dreams. We said when someone sees a dream, in our cultures, it's usually seen as a sign from God. Second thing is called istikhara, something that's done very often. You want to make a decision, you want to choose a path, you're not sure which one you're supposed to choose. So you go to what? You go to istikhara. You open up the Quran maybe. Of course, istikhara can be done in multiple ways. But one of the ways is you open up the Quran, for example, to see, is this path that I'm choosing the right path or the wrong path? Another thing that we look for as signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the good or bad things that happen in our lives. Someone does something, there's a bad result. We say, oh, you see what happened? There must have been something wrong that you did. Something bad that you have done. Or the acceptance or the rejection of our du'as. These are the four things that we mentioned that we usually take as signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we mentioned that there are three reasons, three conclusions that we try to draw from these signs. The first was figuring out what we're doing. Is it right or wrong? That was the first conclusion that we tried to draw. Second conclusion was gauging our spirituality. On a scale of 1 to 10, where do I stand in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That was the second one. The third one was that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put signs in our lives just to shake us up a little bit. You're going on the wrong path. You continue going. Life has become normal for you, but you're on the wrong path. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will throw in in my words, a bomb, a grenade, and he'll leave. He'll throw in something that will change things dramatically around you with the hope that you will wake up. And we also mentioned one of these stories about an individual by the name of Fudayl ibn Iyad. You remember the story of Fudayl, Muhammad? Do you remember really? What was the story of Fudayl?
The story is that he saw a young woman very after that desire.
Uh-huh.
When he was climbing the wall and to act on those desires, he heard a verse from the Quran that told him to not pursue.
What was the verse of the Quran? The verse of the Quran was, in one of the verses of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, has the time not come for you guys to start listening to me? أَلَمْ يَأْنَ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Has the time not come that these arrogant people become humble for me? And then Fudayl heard that in the middle of the night, and that changed the course of his life. This is an example of a situation where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts that sign in his life just to shake things up, just so he wakes up a little bit. I'm going to mention a number one of these, and then we're going to continue with the discussion. Please recite salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Another individual who had to deal with a situation like this, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed his life up dramatically, was an individual by the name of Bishr al-Hafi. Al-Hafi means barefooted. Bishr al-Hafi. Bishr al-Hafi was this guy, he lived in Medina. He lived in Medina, and during the time that he was in Medina, the seventh Imam was there, and the people would come to the seventh Imam. They tell the seventh Imam that we have a major issue. So what's the issue? Well, the issue is that we have this guy living here. Our youngsters, our youth are drawn to him. So what does he do? Well, he's very wealthy, so he puts together parties, right? He puts together ceremonies where they get together, and it's just entertainments, lahw and la'ib, anything harams, that kind of stuff that goes on, and even in parties over here, right? So we don't know what to do with this guy, and he's very wealthy. We don't know how to stop him from putting together these gatherings. So the Imam said, don't worry, I'll see what I can do. I'll go and talk to him. So Imam al-Qadim one day is passing by the house of Bishr, and Bishr, like we said, very wealthy. As the Imam is passing by the house of Bishr, in the house of Bishr, there is a party going on right there. And you know that during that time when they had music, everything was live, right? They didn't know recorded. Everything, the concert was going on right there as the Imam was passing by the house of Bishr. So the Imam is passing by the house of Bishr. Then one of the servants of Bishr comes out of the house to bring out some of the trash and take care of some of the affairs of this party that's going on. So she comes out and she runs into this elder man, the seventh Imam. And the seventh Imam asks the lady or the servant a question. He turns to her and she says, this person who owns this place and has this party going on, Hurrun am abdun? Is he a free man or is he a servant? Now what the Imam was referring to was what? Is he free from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or is he a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's what the Imam had in mind, right? But back in that society, when you said hurrun am abdun, when you said free or servant, what came to your mind? The class in the society, because you had free people and you had servants. So the lady, she's a servant herself, she says, "What, are you kidding me? Don't you see his house? Him, this house, this wealth, this party? Of course he's hur, of course he's free." The Imam, having the other meaning in his mind, you know what he said? He said, of course he's free. If he wasn't free, if he was a servant, he wouldn't dare do things like this in the eye of his master, while his master is watching him. Meaning that if he was really a servant, he would be embarrassed and ashamed enough to not put together these parties. But that lady, she thinks it's just a guy making a random comment. We've come across that situation a lot. You're going somewhere, someone just makes a random comment. You don't think it's a wise piece of information. So the lady goes back into the house. The Jariyah, she goes back into the house. And Bishr, who has now heard of this lady talking to another man, he comes to her and she says, what was going on at the door? The lady says, nothing you have to worry about. You know, this guy, elder guy, random guy, he was passing by. He made this comment. He asked, Hurrun am abdun? And I laughed at him. I said, of course he's hur. What are you talking about? Of course he's hur. If he wasn't hur, how could he put together something like this? But Bishr understood the real meaning of the question. And that's when things sinked in for Bishr. Bishr all of a sudden said, no, this is not what he is referring to. No, ana abdun. That's when he realized what the Imam was referring to. So he started running out of the house and out of the party without any shoes on. Thus, the nickname or the title, what? Al-Hafi, the barefooted one. He started running out of the house with no shoes on, running after Imam al-Qadhim. He said, now today I have realized that I am not free. I'm an abd. Even though in the classes of the society I'm considered hur, I'm considered a free man, but in reality, I'm a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with that, you see this small sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in the life of Bishr, his life flipped 180 degrees. Recite a salawat, please. So sometimes we have signs like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not trying to teach you anything in particular. He's just trying to wake you up, just trying to shake things up so that you understand that you're on the wrong path. Okay. The next point I want to make is this. Sometimes, some of us, we're looking for these special signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then if one of us sees one of these signs, we consider that person to be a special person. Let me give you an example. Right? Muhammad here knows he has to pray. He knows he's supposed to pray. It's wajib on him. He's been taught this. He has no doubt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants this from him. For whatever reason, he's weak, he's tricked by shaitan, he doesn't pray for years and years. Then one night he comes to a lecture. He hears the Maulana talking about salat. He goes home, for example, he opens up the Quran. The Quran opens up on a page that says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu aqimus salat. O you who believe, you should pray. So Muhammad takes this as a sign. When something like that happens to one of us, we consider that person special. We consider that person as someone that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has communicated with him. The reality of the matter is, brothers and sisters, that person is not necessarily special. The reality of the matter is that person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to do more work for so that he will understand what he has to do. That person is not special. The reason why I'm saying this is because normal people like myself and you, we will live our normal lives. We won't see these crazy signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Someone else who does see them, we think that person is special. No, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to send down a weird sign for you to understand your duties, that means that, it's your fault. He's trying to tell you your duties in so many other ways, you won't understand him. That you can only see what? A weird sign. I mean, this is a problem of our communities. You go to a brother or sister, right? Tell them, brother, sister, this is wajib. This is haram. How do we know that? We have hadith, we have verses of the Quran. This is wajib or this is haram. Some way or another, they feel like this is not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to them. One way or another, they feel like they have to wait for some spectacular sign to come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to them that they understand, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from me. No, this is a misunderstanding. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is already talking to you. He's talking to you through the Quran. He's talking to you through the ahadith. Now, if you're the type of person that is going to close his eyes, close up his ears, and tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to speak to you in sign language, you shouldn't count that as something special. No, that means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to go an extra step so that you will understand your duty. A sister, she knows she has to wear hijab. This is understood. She has been taught this. I'm not talking about situations where a person has not been taught. Right? We're not talking about a situation where a sister has questions, where a sister is in doubt, is this really what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from me or not? That's not what I'm referring to here. No, talking about a situation where a sister knows this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you. Hijab is one of those things that's clearly mentioned in the Quran. In verse 31 of Surah An-Nur and in verse 59 of Surah Al-Ahzab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in detail has talked about what? Of hijab. So this is something that this sister knows she has to do. One way or another, she feels like this is not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to her. She has to wait for some spectacular sign that happens on the night of Qadr. And then if she sees that, that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to her. That means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to deliver a message to her. No, you know what that means? That means that you've been closing your eyes. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is struggling for other ways to help you understand your duty. He's already told you through the Quran and the Ahadith, but you won't listen to him. Now he's forced to send down what? Some weird sign that you're looking for. So the reason why I mentioned this point is we need to change our mentality. If you are living your normal life and you are listening to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you through the Quran and the Ahadith, that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is communicating with you. You don't have to look for some weird sign. You don't have to open up the Quran one night and the Quran turns, light, beams of light are coming out of the Quran. You don't have to do that. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a much more simple way of conveying things to us. Recite the salawat, please. All right. Now that we understand this, another question that's brought up regarding the signs that we get from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this. If only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would show me more signs, then my iman would be complete. I remember I was talking to one of the youth in Dearborn, and I was talking to him, and the discussion of Ayatul Bahjat came up. The discussion of an alim who has seen certain things. And you know what he was telling me? He said, Maulana, if I saw the same things that Ayatul Bahjat saw, I would have been like Ayatul Bahjat. This is one of the tricks of shaitan. You know what he'll say? He'll say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't shown you any signs yet. So it's not your fault if you're struggling. Wait, he will show you some spectacular signs, and then when you see those signs, doing good things will become so much easier for you. What is the typical example of this? It's the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. What happened in the story of Prophet Yusuf? Prophet Yusuf, we know about all the whole story of how he grew up in the house of the Aziz Misr and everything like that. The moment when he was tested, the main trial that was put in front of him was what? Was the idea of Zulaykha being there and asking him for that haram request. Correct? Now, this was a request that was so desired by any human being that even the verses of the Quran say, these are the verses of the Quran that say even Yusuf alayhi salam, initially, he was inclined. This is what the verses say. وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ, and she made an effort to get there. وَهَمَّ بِهَا, and he would have made that same effort لَوْلَا أَنْ رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ, if it was not for seeing the sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how serious that test was. The test was so serious that the verses of the Quran themselves say that Yusuf initially, he was inclined, please pay attention to the wording, initially he was inclined in terms of the desires of his body to move towards who? To move towards Zulaykha, to fulfill that desire of his. But then the verse says what? لَوْلَا أَنْ رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ, if it was not for seeing the sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what is our understanding when we come across a story like that? We say, yeah, well, of course, if I saw the sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I wouldn't go there either. I wouldn't do this haram either. And I remember this was a question on my mind for a very long time growing up. Until we went to one of our classes. We had a class called Balagha. Balagha is the science of wording things. If you want to express a message, There's 20 million ways you can express that message. Balagha teaches you how to express that message in the most precise and concise manner possible. This teacher of Balagha, the first day he came to us, he was trying to explain why you're supposed to study Balagha. Why is it important? He brought up this issue of Prophet Yusuf. He said, everyone looks at this verse and said, look at Prophet Yusuf. It's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed him his sign. That's why he didn't commit that sin. But the verse says, لَوْلَا أَنْ رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ. If it wasn't for Yusuf seeing the sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know what that means? That means that Yusuf had done some serious work on himself before reaching that point, that when he was placed in that situation, he saw the sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a major difference between you saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed his sign to him, and the verse saying Yusuf was the one who saw the sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَوْلَا أَنْ رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ. Sometimes shaitan will trick us with this excuse that, if you're not doing so well, it's because you haven't seen those spectacular signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, Habibi, it's not because of that. If you saw, now we're going to talk about it. How come Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't send us more of those signs? We're going to talk about it. But if you see Yusuf alayhi salam seeing those things, it's because he's the one seeing it. He's doing work. He's putting in practice that he is able to see a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that situation. It's not like he's just kicking back and relaxing and saying, oh, okay, if that situation comes up, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show me his burhan. He will show me his sign. No, he's the one who is seeing it, which means he is the one that has done the work to see it. Recite as-salawat, please. All right. So why doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala show us a little bit more of these signs? There's been a historical movement. Every prophet who came, even his companions who already believed in him, after believing in him, they asked for more signs. In particular, this happened to Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Our prophet, multiple times this has happened. After people, I'm not talking about people who didn't believe in the prophet. No, people who believed in the prophet. After he started his message, they would ask for more signs from him. Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so hesitant to send down these signs? This is one of the stories that's in the Quran. It's called the story of Al-Ma'idah. Ma'idah is the name of one of the verses of one of the surahs of the Quran. Muhammad, do you know what Ma'idah means? Spread. Ahsan, the tablecloth. Unfortunately, we don't have a word for it in English, so that's why we're just going to go with dastarkhan, which is the closest we will come across, right? We call it sofre in Farsi, but given the audience, I'm going to go with dastarkhan. So dastarkhan, the whole surah is named Al-Ma'idah because of this story that's mentioned in the surah. What is this story? The companions of Isa alayhi salam, after a while of believing in Isa alayhi salam, a point came where they addressed Isa alayhi salam. They said, Ya Isa, our iman is good, but we want to make it greater, we want to make it stronger. Go tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send down food from the skies for us. We want to take some of that food. We want to enjoy some of that food. When we are eating heavenly food, that will definitely increase our iman. Imagine this brother here. You go home, there's a plate of heavenly food. Are you going to pray that night? Of course, I hope so. Of course you're going to pray that night. You're eating heavenly food now. This is what the companions of Isa alayhi salam asked of Isa alayhi salam. Salawat, please. إذ قال الحواريون يا عيسى ابن مريم, the Hawariyun addressed Isa alayhi salam, هل يستطيع ربك أن ينزل علينا مائدة من السماء? Can he send down a spread full of heavenly food from the skies? What was Isa alayhi salam's response? قال اتقوا الله. It's a very harsh response. He said, be fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is Isa alayhi salam acting in such a weird way. These guys just asked for what? More signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The verses will explain why Isa alayhi salam was taking this approach. Be fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قَالَ اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. If you really believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just do the things that He's asking you to do. Why are you bothering asking for more signs? They explained, قَالُوا نُرِيدُ أَن نَأْكُلَ مِنْهَا. We want to eat from this bread that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to send down from the skies. وَتَتْمَئِنَّ قُلُوبَنَا. Where our hearts will become even more sure of your message. وَنَعْلَمَ أَنْ قَدْ صَدَقْتَنَا وَنَكُونَ عَلَيْهَا مِنَ الشَّاهِدِينَ. And at that point, we will be 100% sure that your message is a completely true message. نَعْلَمَ أَنْ قَدْ صَدَقْتَنَا. We'll know that you have told us the truth. So what did Isa alayhi salam do? He communicated this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قال عيسى ابن مريم اللهم ربنا أنزل علينا مائدة من السماء. Ya Allah, my companions, they are asking for the spread of heavenly food. أنزل علينا مائدة من السماء تكون لنا عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا. And when this spread of food comes down to us, that day will be recognized for us as an Eid, the celebration. لأولنا, for the first generations and the coming generations. وارزقنا وأنت خير الرازقين. Now here is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining why He's hesitant to send down these signs. قال الله, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إني منزلها. Don't worry, I'll send it down. But there's a catch to it. إني منزلها. فمن يكفر بعد منكم. But after I send down that sign, if any of these guys turn away, at that point, when you have seen a clear sign like that, heavenly food is coming to you from the skies. If you turn away, at that point, فَإِنِّي أُعَذِّبُهُ عَذَابًا لَا أُعَذِّبُهُ أَحَدًا مِنَ الْعَالَمِينَ. Tell them, I can send down this. It's not a problem. But if someone turns away after seeing a sign that clear, crystal clear, if you turn away at that point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, their punishment will be worse than the punishment that I have for anyone else. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hesitate, of course in my words, to send down some of these signs? Because there's a major risk to it. The clearer the sign becomes, the greater the chance of the danger and the threat that's going to be there for you becomes. Why? Because every sign that comes down, there's a chance you will reject it. The clearer the sign, the worse the punishment is going to be if you reject that sign. With the kuffar, it was the same thing with the kuffar. The kuffar, they would constantly come to the Prophet. They would say, we know you have the Quran. Okay, like put aside the Quran for right now. Give us a physical sign, right? Like make the moon split in half. I don't know. Create a well in Mecca where there's a lot of water. Create a ranch, a garden where we can go and eat fruits. The Prophet was extremely hesitant. You know why? He said, you guys have rejected my signs up until now. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you His best shot, in the sense that He sends you His clearest sign of all, and then you reject it, you won't have any chance anymore. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give you more chances. So the signs He will send down, He won't send the crystal clear ones. Why? Because there's a chance you'll reject it. And once you reject a sign that is crystal clear, brothers and sisters, that means there's no chance of you moving on the right path. Where there's no chance of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take your life. Because the whole reason we're alive is because we want to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a point comes where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows there's no chance this guy's going to turn back, then there's no point in us living. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, okay, it's time to... That's why in the Quran we look left and right. There were societies. Once the fundamental principles of these societies became evil things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, okay, now it's time to go. Why? Because at this point, there's no chance of these guys turning back. Because there's no chance of them turning back, there's no point in them being alive. It's time for them to go. That's why we have all of these aqwam in the verses of the Quran, Qawm Lut, Thamud, I don't know, this qawm, that qawm. Once the society reached a certain point of evil where they rejected the clearest signs of the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send down a punishment to get rid of them all. This is one of the reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't send down sign after sign after sign. Because if you reject it at that point, then that's it, you're done. So what does He do? He sends down smaller signs into our lives. And by small, I don't mean that they're not clear. I'll explain that they're clear. But they're smaller compared to the things that you and I ask for. Recite a salawat, please. All right. Now, one of the things that we find, inshallah, this is the last point and we're going to end. One of the things that we find with the religion of Islam is this. When it came to the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the miracles of Islam, you find Islam is distancing itself more and more from physical miracles and moving more and more towards intellectual miracles. What does that mean? What were the signs that Isa alayhi salam brought to his people? He healed those who were sick. A lot of his miracles had to do with that. He had people who were dead. He brought them back to life. He blew into clay. It turned into a living bird. These are the signs that we have from Isa alayhi salam. What were the signs that Musa alayhi salam brought to his people? There were a lot of them. At-tufan wal-jarad wal-qummal wal-dhafadi'. Turned the Nile into blood. The whole idea of throwing the staff, all of these signs. These are all physical miracles. This stuff worked for back then. Because back then, the mind of the human being was not intellectually sophisticated enough to understand the intellectual miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if the Prophet had a message, he wanted people to accept his message, what did he have to do? He had to come up with some sort of physical miracle, as did our Prophet to a certain degree. We have stories of our Prophet. The person came to him and said, if you are a Prophet of Allah, make this rock talk. And the Prophet did that. In another incident, he said, if you're a Prophet of Allah, make this tree talk to us. Talk to them. Said, make the moon split in half. We have verses about the Quran about that. So the Prophet also did that. But one of the spectacular things about Islam is that it moved away little by little from these physical miracles, and it moved more towards what? Intellectual miracles. Miracles of intellect. What does that mean? Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do that? Because physical miracles, they wear off over time. Like for example, we have the spring of Zamzam right now in Mecca. That was a miracle when it happened. Is it a miracle right now for the random person? If the random person goes and takes a look at that spring, would they consider that a miracle? Of course, we know what happened, so we consider it a miracle. But the random person, they just say, hey, this is a spring. If you tell them, no, this Ibrahim's family was here and there was no water, it was Safa, Marwa, they'll be like, no, listen, it's just a spring. It's not a miracle now in his eyes. Of course, for us, that's not the case. But with intellectual miracles, they don't wear off over time. I'm going to give you two examples of these miracles. One of the miracles that we have in Islam are some of the rulings, the teachings that we have in Islam. One of them, which I personally consider one of the biggest miracles of Islam, is the strict rulings that we have when it comes to genders. The interaction of genders. Not just that, the looking of genders at one another. We have strict rulings. What does that mean? And there's no other religion I've found ever to have as strict rulings on the issue of genders as does Islam. Islam is the strictest, as far as I've seen, is the strictest when it comes to this issue. But this is a miracle. Why is it a miracle? We have hadith, for example, one of our rulings. The idea of looking at someone from the opposite gender who's not dressed appropriately. Something that unfortunately is becoming a very common thing in this. Well, it's already a common thing, but we have to protect ourselves from. All right. When you take a look at that, we have hadith. The hadith says this: أول النظرة لك. The first time you look, without it being on purpose, in the sense that you were passing by somewhere, you saw someone who wasn't dressed appropriately. أول النظرة لك. That's for you. Don't worry about it. وَالثَّانِيَةُ عَلَيْكَ. The second time, because you know that person is there, or that picture is there, or that clip is there. وَالثَّانِيَةُ عَلَيْكَ. The second time you look, you're harming yourself. عليك. You're harming yourself. وَالثَّالِثَةُ فِيهَا الْحَلْكَةُ. The third time you look, you are ruining your life. You tell me, brothers and sisters, explicit content, looking at the opposite gender that is not dressed appropriately. Studies have been done today by non-Muslims. Forget about Muslims. Non-Muslims. They're calling this a drug. It's an addiction. But you tell me, how does an Arab man, illiterate, and Nabi al-Ummi, illiterate, living 1400 years ago in the middle of some desert, how on earth does he know that this is something that is going to ruin the life of a Muslim? It's going to ruin the family life of a human being. How does he know that? What do you call that? I call that a miracle. We want to see miracles from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't have to wait for the wall to start talking to you. Look at Islam. Look at the teachings of Islam. Some of these are miracles. How does that guy know, who grew up in a tribe where they would eat lizards for lunch? They would kill their daughters because they felt it was bad luck. They would fight with other tribes because that's their way of making a living. How does that guy know? How does he get so sophisticated that he understands that you looking at the opposite gender at the wrong time, the wrong place, that is going to ruin your life? That is a miracle, brothers and sisters. That's one example. Recite salawat, please. The second example, another miracle, intellectual miracle, not physical, intellectual miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? The Quran. What about the Quran? How these verses of the Quran are compatible with one another. The Quran is the only book where when you read the Quran, the tone is a tone of the creator of the earth speaking. The tone. We have other religious books, right? Our Christian brothers and sisters, they have their books. Our Jewish brothers and sisters, they have their books. But when you look at the New Testament and the Old Testament, the tone is not the tone of God speaking. No, it's people telling you about what the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did. It's Christian companions of Isa alayhi salam telling you what Isa alayhi salam did. There is no other book where the tone is coming from the creator of earth. Okay. When you look at the book of something like the Quran, one of the most spectacular things about the Quran is this. It was put together in more than 23 years of the Prophet's life as a prophet. The compatibility of these verses. I'm going to give you one small example tonight, inshallah. Recite a salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraj. When you look in the verses of the Quran, there's a question that many of the prophets have been asked. After they delivered their message, their people would tell them, said, do you want anything from us? Do you want a reward from us? What we refer to in Arabic as ajr. Do you want an ajr from us? Like a monetary reward from us? So naturally, what would these prophets reply? We don't want anything from you. Our ajr is on the shoulders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has to take care of that. When it comes to our prophet, he has answered this question in 3 different ways. When you look at those verses, the initial thought that comes to your mind is that these verses are contradicting one another. One time when they asked the prophet, he says, no, I have no reward that I want from you. My reward is what? In ajriya illa ala rabbil alameen. My reward is on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fair enough. Another time they ask him, he says, قُلْ مَا سَأَلْتُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. He says, no, I want a reward from you guys. What is that? Affection for my family. If you put those two statements in front of anyone, you point to those two, you say, this is a contradiction. These two statements are not compatible. If the Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there shouldn't be contradictions in it. Whenever, brothers and sisters, you see the verses of the Quran look like a contradiction, look closer. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in fact, in that particular part, those two verses, He's trying to point out a delicate point. That's why it looks like a contradiction. The point is so delicate, it may come off as what? As a contradiction, as a tanaqud. Initially, when you look at these two verses, you say, this doesn't make sense. Before you're saying you don't want any reward. Now you're saying you want a reward. Then you go deeper into the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, narrating from His Prophet, says, مَا سَأَلْتُكُم مِّنْ أَجْرٍ فَهُوَ لَكُمْ. You remember I asked you for something as a reward? مَا سَأَلْتُهُ مِنْ أَجْرٍ فَهُوَ لَكُمْ. That's for you guys. He just solved this apparent contradiction that we had in mind. On one hand, He's saying, I don't want a reward from you. On the other hand, He's saying, I do want a reward from you. But then the third time He tells you, that thing I asked from you as a reward, that's actually for you guys. So on one hand, it is a reward. On one hand, it's not really a reward. Because the ones who will benefit from it is not the Prophet. It's the people. So is it an ajr? Is it a reward? In some ways it is. Is it not an ajr? In some ways it's not. Because he doesn't benefit from it. It's like a father giving money to his son. But he says, I'll give you money on this condition that you save up money for college. Is that a reward for the prophets? For the father? Not really. Anytime you look at the verses of the Quran, when two verses, you look at them, at first, this is a contradiction. There's no way these two are compatible. Brothers and sisters, look closer because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to point out a delicate point. That's why it looks like a contradiction. This is another one of the miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran and the compatibility of the verses. If anyone were to come to me on any random day, out of nowhere, why are you a Muslim? The Quran. That's why. There's just too many things when it comes to the Quran that are things that you say, hey, there's no way an Arab living in the middle of a desert could have come up with something like this. My point is we have to move away more from physical miracles towards what? The intellectual miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going to end. Do we have a couple minutes? I'm gonna end with one short story about Imam al-Hadi. Recite as-salawat, please. What time is it? Couple minutes? Okay. So Imam al-Hadi was very young. This is during the time of his father. His father was the Imam al-Jawad, and Imam al-Hadi was 6 years old at that time. And we know that Imam al-Jawad, he also passed away at a very young age. From what I remember, 28, if I'm not mistaken. So one of the khulafa by the name of Mu'tasim from the Bani al-Abbas dynasty, he hears that the son of Imam al-Jawad is very young. Imam al-Jawad has gone on a trip. So the son is alone. Of course, with the women who are going to help him out and everything, but the Imam is not in town. So Mu'tasim comes up with an idea. He says, this family is always giving us issues. Now we have a 6-year-old of them who doesn't even have his guardian around him. What are we going to do? We're going to train him for ourselves. So Mu'tasim tells one of his troops, you go look in the city, find the best of your teachers. This teacher, we're going to appoint him as the teacher of Imam al-Hadi. we're going to appoint him as the teacher of the 6-year-old. By the time the 6-year-old reaches the age of 10 or 12, we've already brainwashed him. At that point, he's not even going to be our enemy. So they choose a guy by the name of Al-Junaidi. Say, Junaidi, your responsibility is to go and do what? Work on the 6-year-old constantly. Until that when he comes to age, then he'll be on our side. He won't be on our enemy anymore. He says, okay. Al-Junaid is being paid by the Khalifa to take care of this. So he continues to work with Imam al-Hadi from the age of 6. A couple years pass by. One of the family members of the Khalifa sees Al-Junaidi. He says, Junaidi, so tell us, what's going on? Have you been able to, he's a 6-year-old, like tell us how much progress you've made. What have you done with this 6-year-old child? He said, did you say child? This guy's not a child. Doesn't act like a child. He is 6 years old, but he doesn't act like a child. It's like, tell us how. He says, so when I went there, I wanted to establish my knowledge for this 6-year-old. I told him, have you heard recited Quran? Do you know Quran? Back then Quran was the #1 source of knowledge. If you didn't know the Quran, you didn't know anything. Do you know the Quran? And he said, yes, I know the Quran. I kept trying to establish my knowledge in front of him. So I told him, I said, recite a surah of the Quran for me. He asked me, which surah? And I didn't go for the small ones. I went for the bigger ones. You know those bigger ones that when the imam starts, you kind of have a doubt. You're like, should I stay or should I leave? So I chose Surah Al Imran. You know how long Al Imran is, Muhammad? It's pretty long. I think it has like 200 something verses. I chose Surah Al Imran. This young child started reciting Surah Al Imran for me. He would explain the verses for me. The parts where I wasn't really sure what the verses meant, he would explain those to me. Every time I tried to establish my knowledge in front of this child, I was outdone. This guy isn't a child. This is not normal. This guy is the same way Isa alayhi salam, when he was a baby, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him speak in front of all of those men. Same thing is going on with this child. Whatever the case is, this is not a normal child. With that, inshallah, we will end tonight's talk. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He teaches us our duties and He gives us the tawfiq to carry them out, inshallah. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He frees our brothers and sisters who are in difficulty and in pain. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He prolongs the life of our dear Maraji'. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He hastens the return of our beloved 12th Imam. Please recite a salawat. Ziyarat after salat, right? Okay.